Hello and welcome. It's so nice to have you here with me tonight. I hope you're safe, comfortable, and ready to let your mind wander. If you're new here, welcome to Midnight Deep Dive, where we explore fascinating topics while you relax or drift towards sleep. And if you've been here before, thank you. Your company on these quiet journeys means more than you know. Tonight, we're meeting some truly remarkable people. Not the ghosts themselves, mind you, but the ghost hunters. The brave, curious, sometimes controversial souls who spent their lives investigating the unexplained. From Victorian gentlemen conducting seances to modern investigators with night vision cameras, each one was driven by that same fundamental question. Is there something beyond what we can see and touch? Now, fair warning, I'll do my best to keep this soothing and sleepy, but these stories have a way of drawing you in. If you find yourself still listening when the last chapter ends, well, at least you'll find out why some of history's brightest minds risked everything to study ghosts, and why the search for proof of the afterlife has captivated us for over a century. Not a bad trade for a few extra waking hours. So settle in, close your eyes if you'd like, and let's begin. In the smoky streets of 1920s London, one man carried a peculiar briefcase. Inside wasn't the usual paperwork of businessmen, but thermometers, cameras, scales, and sealed tape for marking evidence. Harry Price, dressed impeccably in a three-piece suit with his mustache carefully groomed, was on his way to investigate another haunted house. He understood something that other researchers didn't. That investigating ghosts required both the skepticism of a scientist and the appeal of a showman. Born in 1881 in Shropshire, England, Harry Price didn't start life with any advantages. His father was a traveling paper merchant, and young Harry grew up fascinated by two things: magic tricks and mysteries. He taught himself sleight of hand, learned how stage illusions worked, and became quite skilled at performing simple conjuring tricks for friends. This early love of magic would become his greatest asset as a paranormal investigator, because understanding how frauds worked made him remarkably good at detecting them. Price's journey into ghost hunting began casually enough. As a young man involved in London's magic circle, he met other conjurers who were curious about spiritualism. Mediums were everywhere in the early 1900s, claiming to contact the dead, produce ectoplasm, and levitate tables. Some magicians used their knowledge to expose these frauds, but Price took a different approach. He wanted to investigate scientifically, keeping an open mind while using rigorous methods to separate genuine phenomena from clever trickery. By the 1920s, Price had established himself as someone unique in paranormal research. He wasn't a stuffy academic dismissing everything supernatural, nor was he a credulous believer accepting every claim. Instead, he walked a careful line between skepticism and open inquiry, always ready with his equipment and his keen eye for deception. He understood that if ghosts were real, proving it would require more than stories. It would require documentation, measurement, and scientific methodology. In 1925, Price took a bold step and founded the National Laboratory of Psychical Research in London. This wasn't some dusty backroom operation. Price secured proper laboratory space in the heart of London and equipped it with the latest technology adapted for paranormal investigation. He acquired precision scales for weighing mediums during seances, sensitive thermometers for detecting temperature changes, cameras for documentation, and equipment to measure electromagnetic fields. His laboratory became the place to go if you claimed psychic abilities, and Price investigated everyone who walked through his doors. His approach to investigation was methodical and theatrical in equal measure. Before any seance or haunting investigation, Price would carefully prepare. He sealed rooms with tape that would show if doors were opened, marked the exact positions of objects with chalk, and used multiple forms of documentation including detailed written notes, photographs, and witness testimonies. He understood that evidence needed to be bulletproof if it was going to convince skeptics, so he invited both believers and doubters to observe his investigations. This transparency was revolutionary for the time. Price's investigation methods became his signature. He would arrive at a haunted location with his equipment, set up control conditions, and document everything meticulously. Temperature readings were taken at regular intervals. Any movement of objects was measured and photographed. Witnesses were interviewed separately to check for consistency in their accounts. If phenomena occurred, Price wanted multiple forms of evidence. If nothing happened, he was honest about that too. This systematic approach set standards that paranormal investigators still reference today. His most famous case would also become his most controversial, Borley Rectory. This sprawling Victorian mansion in Essex already had a reputation for being haunted when Price first visited in 1929. The rectory's history was steeped in legend. Built in 1863, it supposedly stood on the site of a medieval monastery. Local stories told of a nun who had been buried alive in the walls after falling in love with a monk, and her ghost was said to walk the grounds along a path that became known as the Nun's Walk. When Price first investigated Borley, he encountered the Reverend Eric Smith and his wife, who were living in the rectory and experiencing phenomena they couldn't explain. Bells rang when no one pulled them, footsteps echoed through empty rooms, and mysterious lights appeared in windows. The Smiths were frightened enough that they had contacted a newspaper, which in turn contacted Price. He arrived with his equipment and his team, ready to document whatever might occur. During that first visit, Price and his colleagues experienced strange phenomena firsthand. They heard unexplained footsteps, witnessed objects moving without apparent cause, and recorded dramatic temperature drops in specific locations. Price set up tripwires to detect movement in empty rooms and sealed doors to prove no one was entering or leaving. Some phenomena continued even under these controlled conditions, which intrigued him greatly. He began what would become a decade-long investigation of Borley Rectory. The investigation intensified when the Reverend Lionel Foyster and his wife Marion moved into the rectory in 1930. Under their tenancy, the phenomena became more dramatic and violent. Marion reported being thrown from her bed by invisible hands. Objects were hurled across rooms, and most strikingly, mysterious messages began appearing on the walls. Scrawled in what appeared to be a child's handwriting were pleas like "Marion, please help get," and "Marion light mass prayers." These messages, appearing on walls and scraps of paper throughout the house, seemed to be desperate appeals from a spirit seeking assistance. Price documented everything during the Foyster years, though his relationship with the family was sometimes strained. There were whispers that some phenomena might have been produced by Marion herself, perhaps unconsciously, perhaps deliberately. Price remained cautiously skeptical, noting which phenomena occurred under controlled conditions and which did not. His meticulous documentation during this period would later prove both valuable and problematic. In 1937, after the Foysters left and the rectory stood empty, Price took an extraordinary step. He leased the entire building for 1 year and assembled a team of volunteer observers to conduct what he called the most scientific investigation of a haunted house ever attempted. He placed advertisements seeking people who would stay in the house in shifts, following strict protocols for documenting any phenomena they witnessed. Price created a comprehensive manual called the Blue Book, which specified exactly how observers should conduct themselves. They were to record temperatures at regular intervals, note any sounds or visual phenomena, seal rooms and mark object positions to detect movement, and maintain continuous logs of even mundane observations. The idea was that with enough careful observers following standardized protocols, patterns would emerge and evidence would accumulate. The year-long investigation produced mixed results. Some observers reported dramatic phenomena, objects moving on their own, unexplained sounds, temperature anomalies, and even sightings of the phantom nun. Others spent their shifts in the house experiencing nothing unusual whatsoever. This inconsistency frustrated Price, who had hoped for more definitive results. Still, he compiled all the reports meticulously, acknowledging that while some evidence was intriguing, it remained frustratingly inconclusive. Then in February 1939, disaster struck. Captain William Gregson, who had purchased the rectory, was upstairs unpacking books when an oil lamp fell and ignited. The fire spread rapidly through the old wooden structure. By the time firefighters arrived, Borley Rectory was already engulfed in flames. Observers watching the fire claimed to see a figure of a woman moving behind the windows of the burning building, though everyone had been evacuated. Some said the phantom nun had finally been seen by multiple witnesses, appearing in her home as it burned. Interestingly, Price had documented a séance held years earlier at Borley, where a spirit supposedly predicted the rectory would burn, and that evidence of a murder would be found in the ruins. When investigators sifted through the ashes and debris after the fire, they claimed to have discovered human bones in the cellar. Were these the remains of the murdered nun from the medieval legend? The bones were examined but never definitively identified, adding another layer of mystery to the already complex case. Price published 2 books about his Borley investigations. The Most Haunted House in England appeared in 1940, followed by The End of Borley Rectory in 1946. These books became bestsellers and established Borley as perhaps the most famous haunted house in the world. Price's detailed documentation and dramatic storytelling captured public imagination, and Borley became synonymous with British hauntings. But Price's triumph at Borley would also become his downfall. After his death in 1948, other researchers began examining his work more carefully. They found inconsistencies in his reports, questioned some of his photographic evidence, and suggested he might have faked some phenomena to enhance Borley's reputation and maintain his own celebrity status. Some accused him of throwing stones to create mysterious noises, while others pointed to contradictions in his timeline of events. The accusations damaged Price's reputation significantly. Had he been a careful investigator who documented genuine phenomena, or a showman who let publicity compromise his scientific integrity? The truth likely lies somewhere in between. Price undoubtedly embellished some details and may have enhanced evidence to make better stories. But many of the phenomena at Borley were witnessed by observers he didn't control, and the sheer volume of reports from credible witnesses suggests something unusual was occurring, even if Price's documentation wasn't always perfectly honest. Price's investigation of fraudulent mediums showed him at his best. He famously exposed Helen Duncan, a medium who claimed to produce ectoplasm during seances. Price attended several of her sessions and quickly realized the ectoplasm was actually cheesecloth that she swallowed before seances and regurgitated during performances. His exposure of Duncan and other frauds earned him the respect of skeptics and the hatred of spiritualists. But it demonstrated his commitment to uncovering truth even when it disappointed believers. His personal life revealed a complex man. Price collected an enormous library of books on magic, spiritualism, and the occult. Over 13,000 volumes that he eventually donated to the University of London. He wrote prolifically, producing both serious research and popular books designed to reach general audiences. He maintained correspondence with academics, magicians, and spiritualists across the spectrum of belief, never limiting himself to one perspective. Price's relationship with the media was sophisticated for his time. He understood that newspapers and public interest could provide funding for research that universities wouldn't support. He gave compelling interviews, staged dramatic demonstrations, and made himself available for newspaper photographers. Whether investigating the Schneider brothers' alleged telekinetic powers or exposing fraudulent fortune-tellers, Price ensured the world was watching. In his later years, Price pushed for parapsychology to be recognized as a legitimate academic discipline. He argued for university departments dedicated to psychical research and advocated for applying scientific methodology to supernatural claims. His vision was ghost hunting as a respected field of study, rather than a hobby for eccentrics or a con game for frauds. When Harry Price died in 1948, obituaries were divided. Spiritualists mourned him as a champion who had brought credibility to paranormal investigation. Skeptics acknowledged his role in exposing frauds while questioning his handling of cases like Borley. Academic researchers debated whether he had advanced or hindered serious psychical research. Price's legacy is complicated but undeniable. He established many methods still used by paranormal investigators today. Controlled conditions, multiple forms of documentation, the importance of detecting fraud, and the value of both skeptical and sympathetic witnesses. He demonstrated that investigating the supernatural could be approached systematically, rather than through blind faith or reflexive dismissal. Every modern ghost hunter who brings scientific equipment to investigations, who documents phenomena with multiple cameras, who sets up control conditions to eliminate normal explanations, they're following protocols that Harry Price helped establish. He made ghost hunting something that could be discussed in respectable society and investigated with scientific tools. Whether his legacy is that of a pioneering researcher or a talented showman who let fame compromise his work remains debated. But his impact on paranormal investigation is impossible to deny. Today, when investigators arrive at haunted locations with thermometers, cameras, and electromagnetic field detectors, they're using Harry Price's playbook. When they invite skeptics to observe investigations, they're following his principle of transparency. And when they struggle with the balance between gathering evidence and telling compelling stories, they're wrestling with the same tensions that defined Price's career. He was the first celebrity paranormal investigator, complete with all the benefits and pitfalls that role entails, and his influence echoes through every ghost hunt conducted since. In a small Connecticut town in the 1950s, a young couple sat in their modest living room, listening intently as a frightened family described unexplained phenomena in their home. Ed Warren, a self-taught demonologist with a working-class background, took careful notes while his wife Lorraine, who claimed to be clairvoyant since childhood, closed her eyes and reached out with her senses to feel what might be present. This scene would repeat thousands of times over the next 6 decades. As Ed and Lorraine, Warren became the most famous and controversial paranormal investigators in American history. Ed Warren was born in 1926 in Bridgeport, Connecticut, into a family that struggled financially during the Great Depression. His childhood, by his own account, was marked by paranormal experiences that most people would find terrifying. He claimed that the house where he grew up was haunted, that he saw apparitions moving through rooms, heard unexplained sounds, and witnessed objects moving on their own. Rather than dismiss these experiences as childhood imagination, they sparked a lifelong fascination with the supernatural. Ed's formal education ended early. He left school at 15 to work and help support his family, eventually serving in the Navy during World War II. After the war, he returned to Connecticut and tried various jobs, including house painting. But his true calling was elsewhere. The paranormal experiences of his childhood had never left him, and he began reading everything he could find about ghosts, hauntings, and the supernatural. He taught himself about demonology, studying religious texts, historical accounts of possession, and reports of exorcisms. Lorraine Morin was born in 1927, also in Bridgeport. She grew up in a Catholic family and claimed from an early age that she could see things others couldn't. She described seeing auras around people, sensing presences in empty rooms, and having premonitions about future events. Her family accepted her claims, seeing them as a spiritual gift rather than imagination or mental illness. When she met Ed at a movie theater when she was just 16, she felt an immediate connection. They married shortly after, beginning a partnership that would last over 6 decades. In 1952, the Warrens founded the New England Society for Psychic Research, one of the oldest ghost hunting organizations in the United States. Their approach to paranormal investigation was different from the more academic psychical research societies. The Warrens weren't interested in laboratory experiments or statistical analysis. They investigated hauntings in people's homes, and they approached these cases through an explicitly religious lens, specifically Catholic theology. Ed identified himself as a demonologist, though this wasn't a formally recognized profession. There were no universities offering degrees in demonology, no professional organizations certifying demonologists. Ed studied the subject independently through religious texts, historical accounts, and extensive reading. He developed a framework for understanding paranormal phenomena based on Catholic theology, dividing supernatural entities into 3 categories: inhuman spirits that had never been human, demons; human spirits, ghosts of deceased people; and poltergeists, which Ed believed were usually caused by living people unconsciously projecting psychokinetic energy. Lorraine's role in their investigations was equally important. She claimed to be a light trance medium and clairvoyant, able to sense presences that others couldn't detect. During investigations, she would walk through houses, describing what she felt and saw psychically. She would sense cold spots, feel areas of negative energy, and sometimes claim to see spirits or receive impressions about their identities and reasons for remaining. Ed would document everything Lorraine experienced, while also conducting historical research and interviews. Their investigation methods combined technology with religious practice in ways that set them apart from other researchers. They brought cameras to haunted locations, audio recorders to capture potential voice phenomena, and later video cameras and electromagnetic field detectors. But they also carried holy water, crucifixes, religious medals, and blessed objects. They believed these items could both protect investigators from malevolent entities and potentially affect supernatural phenomena. The Warrens worked closely with Catholic priests, particularly those trained in exorcism. When they identified what they believed to be demonic infestation or possession, they would contact clergy who could perform blessings, cleansings, or in extreme cases, formal exorcisms. This relationship with the church gave them credibility among religious believers, while making skeptics even more doubtful of their methods. Their most famous case became synonymous with American haunting folklore, the Amityville Horror. In December 1975, George and Kathy Lutz fled their home at 112 Ocean Avenue in Amityville, New York, after just 28 days, claiming the house was possessed by demonic entities. The Warrens investigated in early 1976, conducting a seance at the property. During their investigation, their photographer allegedly captured an image of a young boy peering from a doorway, a photograph that would become one of the most famous pieces of alleged paranormal evidence, though its authenticity remains hotly disputed. Ed and Lorraine supported the Lutz's story completely. They claimed the house was indeed infested with demonic forces, attracted by the violence of the DeFeo murders that had occurred there in 1974. The Warrens helped publicize the case, which became a best-selling book and launched a film franchise. But when serious doubts emerged about the Lutz's honesty, when lawyers claimed the entire story had been concocted for profit, the Warrens' credibility suffered. Critics pointed to Amityville as evidence that the Warrens were either easily fooled or complicit in perpetrating hoaxes. The Annabelle case showcased the Warrens' approach to what they considered demonic activity. In 1970, they were contacted by 2 nursing students who claimed their Raggedy Ann doll was moving on its own and leaving notes. The Warrens investigated and concluded the doll wasn't possessed by a child's spirit, as the students initially believed. Instead, Ed determined that a demonic entity was manipulating the doll, using it as a conduit to ultimately possess one of the students. The Warrens took possession of the doll and eventually housed it in their occult museum in Connecticut, where it became one of their most famous artifacts. Perhaps their most significant investigation, though largely unknown until decades later, was the Perron family case in Rhode Island. Beginning in 1971, the Warrens spent considerable time investigating the Perron farmhouse, where the family reported years of escalating paranormal phenomena. The Warrens identified what they believed was a powerful malevolent entity attached to the property. This case would later inspire the Conjuring films, which portrayed Ed and Lorraine as heroic investigators battling dark supernatural forces. The Warrens claimed to have investigated over 10,000 cases during their careers, though detailed documentation exists for only a small fraction. They traveled extensively throughout New England and beyond, responding to families who reported hauntings, objects moving, voices, apparitions, and feelings of oppression. They gave lectures at colleges and universities, speaking about the reality of the supernatural and the dangers of dabbling in the occult. Ed was a charismatic speaker who used humor and dramatic storytelling to engage audiences. Their marriage was by all accounts strong and loving. They worked together seamlessly, with Ed handling the research and confrontational aspects, while Lorraine provided spiritual sensitivity and communication with entities. They complemented each other's strengths and presented a united front to both believers and skeptics. They raised a daughter, Judy, who they largely kept away from their work, understanding that their profession brought both attention and potential danger. The controversies surrounding the Warrens were numerous and persistent. Skeptics accused them of exaggerating evidence, exploiting frightened families, and making money from people's fears. Some families they investigated later claimed the Warrens had made situations worse, introducing talk of demons and possession, where simpler explanations would have sufficed. Critics pointed out that Ed had no formal training in theology, psychology, or any scientific discipline, making his demonologist title essentially self-appointed and meaningless from an academic standpoint. Paranormal researchers who took more scientific approaches often distanced themselves from the Warrens. Their religious framework, theatrical presentation style, and willingness to work with Hollywood to dramatize their cases struck many researchers as damaging to the field's credibility. The Warrens' absolute certainty about demonic forces, their apparent unwillingness to consider psychological or natural explanations, made them seem credulous at best and deliberately deceptive at worst to skeptical investigators. Yet the Warrens had defenders. Many families they helped spoke gratefully of their assistance when no one else would take their experiences seriously. Catholic priests they worked with praised their dedication and effectiveness. Believers appreciated that the Warrens took supernatural evil seriously, providing comfort and help to people who felt terrorized by unseen forces. For those who shared the Warrens' religious worldview, their investigations weren't pseudoscience but spiritual warfare against genuine evil. Ed Warren passed away in 2006 at age 79. He remained active in paranormal investigation until shortly before his death, continuing to give lectures and consultations. Lorraine continued their work for another 13 years, finally passing in 2019 at age 92. In their final years, they witnessed an extraordinary resurgence of interest in their cases through the Conjuring film series, which introduced their investigations to a new generation and portrayed them as heroic figures fighting supernatural darkness. The film's success brought unprecedented attention to the Warrens' work, establishing them as iconic figures in paranormal investigation. But it also complicated their legacy. The dramatization and horror movie conventions made it even harder to separate fact from fiction in their actual cases. Young people inspired by the movies might not realize how much creative liberty was taken with real investigations, or understand the controversies that surrounded the Warrens during their lifetimes. The debate over the Warrens' legitimacy continues. Were they genuine investigators who encountered real demonic phenomena? Were they sincere but mistaken, interpreting natural occurrences and psychological distress through a religious lens? Were they skilled self-promoters who found a profitable niche? The answer likely varies by case, falling somewhere along the spectrum between genuine belief and commercial exploitation. What's undeniable is their cultural impact. The Warrens made demonology a recognized, if controversial, part of ghost hunting. They demonstrated enormous public appetite for stories about hauntings and possession. They showed how paranormal investigation could be combined with religious faith rather than kept separate. And they created a template for the married investigation team that many subsequent ghost hunters have followed. Their occult museum, maintained by family members after their deaths, contains artifacts from decades of investigation. The Annabelle doll sits in its glass case, supposedly cursed objects line the shelves, and various items the Warrens believed held negative spiritual energy are carefully stored. Whether these objects are genuinely dangerous or simply props in an elaborate mythology depends entirely on one's worldview. Ed and Lorraine Warren lived long enough to become legends. They went from obscure local investigators to cultural icons whose cases were transformed into entertainment, consumed by millions worldwide. Whether history remembers them as pioneers who brought serious attention to demonic phenomena, or as sensationalists who exploited fear for profit remains to be seen. But their influence on how Americans think about hauntings, demons, and paranormal investigation is impossible to overstate. They made ghost hunting personal, emotional, and explicitly spiritual, forever changing the field they dedicated their lives to exploring. In a cramped Manhattan apartment overflowing with files, photographs, and audio recordings, a man with a distinctive Austrian accent sat at his typewriter, documenting yet another investigation into the supernatural. Hans Holzer, parapsychologist, author, and tireless researcher, would write over 120 books during his lifetime, conduct thousands of investigations, and become one of the most influential voices in paranormal research. Yet despite his enormous productivity and impact on the field, he remained largely unknown outside the world of ghost hunting. Hans Holzer was born in Vienna, Austria in 1920 into a cultured European family. Vienna at that time was a city of rich intellectual tradition, steeped in history, art, and the occult traditions of Central Europe. Young Hans grew up surrounded by old buildings with centuries of stories, folklore that accepted the supernatural as part of everyday life, and a cultural atmosphere that didn't automatically dismiss claims of ghosts and spirits. His family fled Austria in the 1930s as fascism rose across Europe, eventually settling in New York. This transition from Old World Vienna to New York City would shape Holzer's unique approach to paranormal investigation. Combining European mysticism with American pragmatism, old ghost stories with new recording technology. He pursued higher education seriously, studying archaeology and ancient history at Columbia University, and eventually earning a PhD in comparative religion. This academic background gave him something most ghost hunters lacked: formal scholarly training and the ability to approach the supernatural as a subject worthy of serious study. Holzer preferred the title parapsychologist to ghost hunter, seeing his work as a legitimate branch of scientific inquiry rather than sensationalism or entertainment. He argued passionately that ghosts were natural phenomena that could be studied, documented, and understood through proper research methods. In his view, spirits weren't supernatural at all. They were simply energy patterns left behind by deceased individuals, no more miraculous than radio waves or electricity. phenomena that would have seemed magical before science explained them. His investigation methodology was systematic and scholarly. Before visiting any allegedly haunted location, Holzer would research its history thoroughly. He examined death records, property histories, newspaper archives, and local folklore, looking for deaths, tragedies, or significant events that might explain reported phenomena. He believed understanding a location's past was essential for understanding its present hauntings. Holzer's signature approach involved working with psychic mediums, particularly Ethel Johnson Mayers and later Sybil Leek. His method was elegant in its simplicity. He would bring a medium to a haunted location without telling them anything about the property's history or the phenomena people had experienced. The medium would then enter a trance state and describe what they sensed, saw, or received psychically. Holzer would document everything the medium said, and afterward, he would research whether their impressions matched historical facts about the location. When a medium described a man named John who died in a fire, and Holzer's subsequent research confirmed that a John had indeed died in a fire at that location, he considered it evidential, suggesting genuine contact with the deceased rather than lucky guessing or cold reading. This approach combined the mystical with the methodical, the psychic with the provable. Whether it actually demonstrated contact with the dead or simply showed that some mediums had remarkable abilities to gather and process information remains debated. Holzer's most famous investigation occurred at a townhouse in Manhattan's Greenwich Village that would later inspire the movie Ghost. The house at 14 West 10th Street had a long history of reported hauntings, with residents and visitors describing apparitions, unexplained sounds, and overwhelming feelings of presence. Holzer investigated the location in the 1970s with medium Ethel Johnson Mayers, who described sensing a male presence named Adam who had died violently in the house. Holzer's historical research uncovered that a man named Adam had indeed lived in the house in the 19th century and had died there under unclear circumstances. The correlation between the medium's psychic impressions and historical facts became one of Holzer's most cited examples of evidential mediumship. The case gained renewed attention decades later when the film Ghost borrowed elements from Holzer's investigation, though the movie was fictional and greatly embellished the actual case. His willingness to investigate claims that other researchers dismissed showcased both his open-mindedness and his critics' main objection. After Elvis Presley's death in 1977, numerous people reported seeing his spirit or receiving communications from him. While many investigators would dismiss such reports as grief-induced hallucinations or attention-seeking, Holzer took them seriously. He investigated multiple claims of Elvis's ghost, interviewed witnesses, and worked with mediums who claimed to channel the deceased singer. For Holzer, the recently deceased often left stronger impressions than those who had died long ago, making them easier to detect and potentially communicate with. Skeptics mocked such investigations, but Holzer maintained that all claims deserved investigation regardless of how unlikely they seemed. His criterion was evidence, not plausibility. If witnesses were credible and phenomena were reported, that warranted investigation. This approach led him to study everything from historic hauntings to celebrity ghosts to alleged UFO encounters. Holzer's productivity was genuinely astonishing. He wrote constantly, producing an average of 2 to 3 books per year for decades. His titles ranged from serious academic works on parapsychology to popular paperbacks about haunted houses across America. Books like Ghost Hunter, Ghosts, True Encounters with the World Beyond, and America's Haunted Houses brought paranormal investigation to mainstream readers who might never attend a seance or visit a haunted location. He wrote in clear, accessible prose, avoiding academic jargon while maintaining scholarly standards of documentation. Television discovered Holzer in the 1960s and 1970s, making him a frequent guest on talk shows and paranormal programs. He appeared on everything from serious documentaries to late-night entertainment shows, always presenting himself as a scholar studying natural phenomena rather than an occultist dabbling in dark forces. His Austrian accent, professional demeanor, and academic credentials gave him an air of authority that helped legitimize paranormal research in mainstream media. He could discuss ghosts on national television without seeming like a charlatan or eccentric. His approach to hauntings was notably compassionate rather than confrontational. Unlike investigators who sought to drive spirits away or bind them, Holzer believed most ghosts were confused or traumatized, unaware they had died or unable to move on due to unfinished business. His goal wasn't exorcism but assistance. During investigations, he would often speak directly to spirits, explaining their situation gently and encouraging them to move toward the light or accept that they were deceased and could leave their earthly attachments behind. Holzer pioneered the use of electronic voice phenomena in paranormal investigation. He experimented extensively with recording equipment, trying to capture spirit voices on tape. He documented thousands of recordings over his career, analyzing them for patterns and content. While skeptics argued that EVP was nothing more than random noise interpreted as voices through pareidolia, Holzer insisted that careful analysis could distinguish genuine spirit communication from audio artifacts. He developed protocols for EVP recording that many investigators still reference. His personal life reflected his professional interests. He married twice, both times to women who supported his paranormal research. His second wife, Catherine Buxhoeveden, worked as his research assistant and shared his fascination with the supernatural. They lived in a New York apartment surrounded by artifacts from investigations, boxes of audio recordings containing alleged spirit voices, and Holzer's vast library of occult and paranormal literature. Critics questioned Holzer's methodology on several grounds. They argued he relied too heavily on mediums whose abilities couldn't be independently verified. They pointed out that many of his verified historical facts were vague enough that mediums could have made educated guesses or gathered information through normal means. The correlation between a medium's impressions and historical events didn't necessarily prove supernatural communication. It might simply show that some people are remarkably good at gathering and synthesizing information. The scientific community largely ignored or dismissed Holzer's work. Despite his PhD and scholarly approach, mainstream academics viewed parapsychology as pseudoscience. His investigations were considered entertainment rather than research, his conclusions unwarranted by his evidence. This exclusion from academic respectability frustrated Holzer, who believed that scientific bias prevented serious study of phenomena that deserved investigation. Yet Holzer's influence on popular culture and paranormal investigation was substantial and lasting. He introduced millions of people to concepts like electronic voice phenomena, stone tape theory, the idea that environments can record and replay emotional events, and the distinction between intelligent hauntings, interactive spirits, and residual energy, recorded playbacks of past events. His books remained continuously in print for decades, introducing generation after generation to paranormal investigation as a field that could be both serious and accessible. Many professional ghost hunters cite Holzer as an early inspiration, who showed that investigating the supernatural could be a respected, educated pursuit rather than a fringe hobby. He demonstrated that one could approach hauntings with compassion and scholarly rigor, that ghost hunting didn't require either blind belief or aggressive skepticism. His method of combining historical research, psychic mediumship, and technological documentation became a template that many investigators still follow. In his later years, even as health issues slowed him down, Holzer continued writing and investigating. He remained convinced that consciousness survived death and that communication with the deceased was not only possible but provable through proper research methods. He gave interviews discussing his cases and defending his methods against skeptics who dismissed his life's work as wishful thinking or misinterpretation. Hans Holzer died in 2009 at age 89, having spent over 6 decades investigating the paranormal and documenting what he believed was evidence of life after death. His enormous body of work, 120-plus books, thousands of case files, countless audio recordings, stands as both a monument to his dedication and a controversial legacy that divides believers and skeptics. Whether his investigations represent genuine contact with the deceased or elaborate interpretations of ambiguous evidence remains debated. But his impact on how we investigate and think about hauntings is undeniable. Every paranormal investigator who uses audio equipment to capture EVP, who researches a location's history before investigating, who approaches ghosts with compassion rather than fear, is following methods that Holzer helped establish and popularize. His vast body of work serves as both documentation of decades of investigation and a fascinating time capsule of how Americans thought about ghosts in the late 20th century. Reading Holzer's books today, one encounters a worldview where the supernatural is natural, where death is merely a transition, and where the boundaries between worlds are permeable enough that communication is possible for those patient and skilled enough to attempt it. Whether that worldview reflects reality or hope, science or belief, remains the question that drove Hans Holzer throughout his remarkably productive life. In the quiet English countryside, an unassuming man with a notebook and camera approached yet another reportedly haunted location. Andrew Green had no university degrees in parapsychology, no television show making him famous, and no desire for celebrity. Yet over 50 years, he would investigate more haunted locations than perhaps any other researcher in history. Over 1,500 cases meticulously documented with the patience and precision of a dedicated amateur scientist. He was, in many ways, the anti-celebrity ghost hunter, more interested in careful cataloging than sensational claims. Andrew Green was born in 1927 in Middlesex, England, and grew up during World War II. His childhood was marked by an experience he would reference throughout his career. At age 7, he claimed to have seen the apparition of a woman in old-fashioned clothing walking through his family's home. The figure passed through a closed door and vanished. Rather than dismissing this as childhood imagination, Green became fascinated by the question of what he had seen. This early experience planted the seeds for what would become a lifelong dedication to investigating ghostly phenomena. Unlike many paranormal investigators who came from academic backgrounds or theatrical traditions, Green's career was in public service. He worked for many years in local government, a practical, no-nonsense profession that perhaps influenced his methodical approach to ghost hunting. He didn't seek to prove or disprove the existence of ghosts. He simply wanted to document reports, investigate circumstances, and compile information that future researchers might find useful. Green's investigation methodology was straightforward and systematic. When reports of a haunting reached him, he would begin with thorough research into the location's history. He examined property records, interviewed long-time residents, and searched for any deaths, tragedies, or significant events associated with the site. He understood that many ghost stories were embellished folklore, but he also believed that some had kernels of truth that deserved documentation. His field investigations were similarly methodical. Green would visit locations multiple times, at different times of day, and in varying weather conditions. He understood that atmospheric factors, lighting, and observer psychology all affected perception. He brought basic equipment: thermometers to measure temperature, cameras to document the environment, and audio recording devices to capture any unusual sounds. But unlike later generations of ghost hunters, with their arrays of electronic gadgets. Green believed the most important tools were careful observation and detailed note-taking. Green was particularly interested in what he called repeater ghosts, apparitions that appeared regularly in the same location, following predictable patterns. These consistent reports from multiple witnesses over extended time periods intrigued him more than one-time experiences or dramatic claims. He theorized that if ghosts were some form of recorded energy, repeater phenomena might represent the strongest or most frequently recorded events. One of his most extensive investigations involved the Theatre Royal in Drury Lane, London, one of England's most famous haunted theatres. The theatre had reports of multiple ghosts, including a man in grey who supposedly appeared before successful productions. Green investigated the theatre over several years, interviewing staff, reviewing historical records, and spending numerous nights in the building. While he never personally witnessed an apparition there, he documented dozens of consistent accounts from credible witnesses, creating a comprehensive case file that remains valuable to researchers. Green was skeptical of many ghost claims while remaining open to the possibility that some phenomena couldn't be easily explained. He investigated countless cases and concluded that many had mundane explanations. Old buildings settling and creaking, light and shadow creating illusions, people misinterpreting natural phenomena. He estimated that perhaps 95% of ghost reports had ordinary explanations, but that remaining 5%, cases with multiple witnesses, consistent phenomena, and no apparent normal cause, those intrigued him and kept him investigating. His approach to electronic equipment evolved over his decades of research. In his early years, he used simple audio recorders and cameras. As technology advanced, he experimented with electromagnetic field detectors, infrared thermometers, and video cameras. But Green remained cautious about interpreting equipment readings as evidence of ghosts. A spike on an EMF meter might indicate many things: faulty wiring, electronic devices, or electromagnetic fields from various sources. He insisted that equipment readings needed to be correlated with other evidence and witness experiences before being considered potentially paranormal. Green's writing was prolific, though less well-known than Hans Holzer's popular works. He wrote numerous books documenting British hauntings, often organized geographically so readers could explore haunted locations in their own regions. Titles like Ghosts of Today and Our Haunted Kingdom provided detailed accounts of cases he had investigated, complete with witness testimonies, historical background, and his own cautious conclusions. His writing style was straightforward and undramatic, presenting evidence and allowing readers to draw their own conclusions. He was a founding member of several paranormal research organizations and maintained connections with researchers worldwide. Green believed in sharing information and collaborating with other investigators rather than competing for credit or publicity. He would freely share his case files with other researchers, understanding that advancing knowledge required cooperation rather than territorial behavior. Green's philosophy about ghosts evolved through decades of investigation. He came to believe that many apparitions might be recordings somehow impressed on the environment, energy or information from past events that could occasionally be perceived by living people. This stone tape theory suggested that hauntings weren't necessarily conscious spirits, but rather environmental playbacks of significant past events. This theory aligned with his observations that many apparitions seemed unaware of witnesses and repeated the same actions without variation. However, Green also acknowledged cases that seemed to involve intelligent interaction between witnesses and apparent spirits. Some apparitions appeared to notice and react to living people, suggesting consciousness rather than mere recording. He remained agnostic about whether these represented actual survival of consciousness or some other phenomenon science didn't yet understand. His investigation of crisis apparitions particularly interested him. These were cases where people reported seeing loved ones at the moment of their death, even when separated by great distances. Green collected and analyzed numerous such accounts, finding patterns that exceeded what chance alone would predict. While skeptics argued these could be explained by coincidence and selective memory, Green felt the consistency and number of reports warranted serious consideration. Green was also interested in haunted objects, items that seemed to carry paranormal associations from one location to another. He investigated several cases where people reported that moving a particular object into their home preceded the onset of unusual phenomena. While skeptical of many such claims, he documented cases where multiple people independently associated phenomena with specific objects, suggesting something more than mere superstition might be involved. Throughout his career, Green maintained a day job and investigated hauntings in his spare time. This amateur status actually enhanced his credibility in some ways. He had no financial incentive to find ghosts, no television contracts requiring dramatic results, no books to sell that depended on sensational claims. He investigated because he was curious, and because he believed careful documentation might eventually help science understand phenomena that currently seemed inexplicable. Andrew Green died in 2004 at age 77, having devoted over 50 years to investigating and documenting British hauntings. He left behind an extraordinary archive, over 1,500 case files, thousands of photographs, extensive audio recordings, and detailed written accounts of his investigations. This archive represents perhaps the most comprehensive single collection of British haunting investigations ever compiled by one researcher. His legacy is that of the dedicated amateur scientist, someone who approached an unofficial, often ridiculed field with patience, methodology, and intellectual honesty. He didn't claim to have proven ghosts exist, but he insisted that the phenomena people reported deserved serious investigation rather than automatic dismissal. His careful documentation provided resources for later researchers, while his skeptical approach within a framework of open inquiry offered a model for how to investigate unusual claims. Modern paranormal researchers studying British hauntings often consult Green's work. His case files provide historical documentation of phenomena reported at locations that remain active today, allowing comparison of current experiences with past reports. His methods, thorough historical research, multiple site visits, careful documentation, healthy skepticism, remain relevant regardless of advancing technology. Andrew Green represents a particular tradition in British ghost hunting. Understated, scholarly, focused on documentation rather than drama. He didn't seek to frighten or entertain, but to observe, record, and preserve information that might someday help explain experiences that millions of people have reported throughout history. Whether ghosts are real or represent misperception of natural phenomena, Green's patient work created a valuable archive that honors the experiences people report, while maintaining the standards of careful investigation. In an era when ghost hunting increasingly means television cameras and dramatic confrontations, Andrew Green's example reminds us that serious investigation requires patience, precision, and commitment to evidence over entertainment. His 1,500 investigations stand as a testament to one man's quiet dedication to understanding the unexplained, one case at a time, one careful observation after another, year after year, until a lifetime of curiosity had created an irreplaceable resource for anyone seeking to understand the mysteries he spent 50 years exploring. On a late summer evening in 1977, two men stood at the door of a modest council house in Enfield, North London, about to begin an investigation that would consume the next 18 months of their lives and become one of the most controversial cases in paranormal research history. Maurice Grosse, an inventor and businessman who had joined the Society for Psychical Research only a year earlier, and Lyon Playfair, a journalist and author recently returned from Brazil, where he had studied that country's rich tradition of paranormal phenomena, could not have imagined the complexity, frustration, and fascination that awaited them inside that ordinary house. Maurice Grosse came to paranormal investigation late in life, and for the most heartbreaking of reasons. Born in 1919, he had spent most of his career as a successful inventor and businessman, creating products and building a comfortable life. But in 1976, his world shattered when his adult daughter died in a motorcycle accident. The grief devastated him in ways that financial success and professional accomplishment couldn't heal. He found himself consumed by a question that billions of people throughout history have asked: is death truly the end? Grosse began attending lectures at the Society for Psychical Research, reading extensively about survival evidence, and questioning whether consciousness might continue beyond physical death. His engineering background made him naturally analytical, but his grief made him desperate for evidence that his daughter still existed somewhere, somehow. When the SBR received reports about strange occurrences at the Hodgson family home in Enfield, Grosse volunteered to investigate. He was 58 years old, with no formal training in paranormal investigation, but he brought technical knowledge, determination, and a profound personal need for answers. Lyon Playfair brought different expertise to their partnership. Born in 1935, he had worked as a journalist and translator in Brazil, where he became fascinated by that country's spiritist tradition and psychic phenomena. Brazil's culture accepted paranormal experiences far more readily than Britain's did, and Playfair had witnessed things there that challenged his understanding. Mediums performing apparent psychic surgery, poltergeist cases in Sao Paulo, materializations at spiritist centers. He wrote a book about Brazilian paranormal traditions and returned to England convinced that consciousness could affect physical reality in ways Western science didn't acknowledge. When Playfair learned about the Enfield case and offered to assist Grosse, he brought experience with poltergeist phenomena and an understanding that such cases often centered on adolescents undergoing physical and emotional changes. The partnership of grieving father and experienced researcher, engineer, and journalist would prove remarkably effective despite their occasional disagreements about interpretation and approach. The Hodgson family consisted of single mother Peggy and her 4 children. The phenomena had begun in late August 1977, with knocking sounds and furniture moving on its own. By the time Grosse and Playfair arrived, the family was terrified. 11-year-old Janet and her 13-year-old sister Margaret had witnessed their chest of drawers sliding across the floor, despite their mother's attempts to push it back. The knocking sounds had intensified, objects were flying across rooms, and the family felt under siege in their own home. Grosse's investigation methodology reflected his technical background. He set up audio recording equipment throughout the house, documenting hundreds of hours of sounds, knocks, crashes, and eventually the most disturbing phenomenon: Janet speaking in a deep, rough, masculine voice completely unlike her own. This voice, which claimed to be Bill Wilkins, an elderly man who had died in the house years earlier, was captured on numerous recordings. Medical professionals who later examined these recordings couldn't explain how an 11-year-old girl could produce such sounds without damaging her vocal cords. Playfair focused on context and research. He investigated the house's history and confirmed that a man named Bill Wilkins had indeed died there, in circumstances matching what the gruff voice claimed. He researched poltergeist cases from around the world, looking for patterns. He documented meticulously, measuring distances that objects had traveled, photographing damage, and maintaining detailed logs of every incident. The 2 investigators spent countless hours in the Hodgson house, often staying late into the night when phenomena seemed most active. They witnessed furniture moving, heard the persistent knocking and crashes, watched Janet during the episodes when the masculine voice would speak through her. They invited other researchers, journalists, and skeptics to observe, understanding that credibility required multiple witnesses. Some visitors experienced phenomena, others didn't, creating a pattern of inconsistency that would later fuel skepticism. But the investigation became complicated when Grosse and Playfair caught the children faking some phenomena. They observed the girls bending spoons when they thought no one was watching, making knocking sounds themselves, and attempting to deceive investigators. This discovery was devastating, but didn't convince the investigators that everything was fake. They theorized that children experiencing genuine paranormal phenomena might also fake incidents when authentic activity temporarily ceased, trying to maintain the attention and support they were receiving. The investigators developed different relationships with the family. Grosse became almost a father figure to Janet, providing stability, patience, and support during terrifying experiences. His kindness and genuine concern won the family's trust, creating an environment where phenomena might occur more freely. Playfair maintained more professional distance while also developing concern for the family's well-being. Media attention brought both help and problems. The BBC filmed in the house, but later broadcast a program suggesting the phenomena were faked after allegedly catching the children attempting deception. National newspapers covered the story, some sympathetically, others skeptically. The publicity brought additional investigators, but also increased stress on a family already traumatized by their experiences and the constant scrutiny. The phenomenon of Janet speaking in the Bill Wilkins voice particularly fascinated and disturbed both investigators. The voice would emerge during what appeared to be trance states, speaking for extended periods about its life and death. It used slang and made references that Janet supposedly couldn't have known. When investigators asked questions, the voice sometimes provided information that later proved historically accurate. Was this remarkable evidence of spirit communication or an extraordinary performance by a disturbed child? The investigators wrestled with this question constantly. Grosse and Playfair faced criticism from multiple directions. Some SBR members felt they were too credulous, accepting paranormal explanations too readily. Skeptics argued that catching the children faking even once should have ended the investigation, that all phenomena could be explained by attention-seeking children fooling gullible investigators. The fact that Grosse desperately wanted to believe in survival because of his daughter's death led critics to question whether grief had compromised his objectivity. But the investigators pointed to evidence that seemed difficult to dismiss. Police officers had witnessed furniture moving before Grosse and Playfair became involved. Neighbors had experienced phenomena. Journalists from different publications had reported strange occurrences. The sheer consistency of reports across months from people with varying levels of belief suggested something more than simple fraud by children. The phenomena gradually diminished through 1978 and finally ceased in September 1979. The family could finally live without constant supernatural disruption, though the experience left lasting effects on everyone involved. Janet and her siblings grew up, moved away, and largely avoided public discussion of their experiences. The house in Enfield became just another residence in a working-class neighborhood. Grosse continued investigating paranormal claims after Enfield, but that case remained his most significant work. He wrote about it, lectured on it, and defended it against critics until his death in 2006. He never found the definitive evidence of survival he sought after his daughter's death, but he believed Enfield showed that something beyond current scientific understanding was real. His last interviews revealed a man still convinced, 30 years later, that what he witnessed couldn't be explained by normal means. Playfair wrote the definitive account of the case in his book, This House is Haunted. He continued researching paranormal phenomena worldwide, studying Brazilian mediumship, investigating other poltergeist cases, and writing about consciousness and psi phenomena. He defended the Enfield case until his death in 2021, arguing that dismissing it required ignoring too much testimony from credible witnesses. His final writings expressed frustration with skeptics who, in his view, rejected evidence because it didn't fit their worldview rather than because the evidence was insufficient. The legacy of their investigation remains deeply controversial. Enfield is either one of the best documented poltergeist cases or a cautionary tale about how even intelligent researchers can be fooled. The hundreds of hours of audio recordings, the photographs, the witness testimonies. These either represent impressive documentation of genuine phenomena or show how ambiguous evidence can be interpreted according to prior beliefs. The case raises enduring questions about paranormal investigation. How do you evaluate evidence when some is proven false? Can you maintain objectivity when personal grief drives your inquiry? How much weight should be given to children's testimony, especially when they're caught lying? When does healthy skepticism become closed-minded dismissal, and when does open-mindedness become credulity? Modern researchers still study the Enfield case, some supporting the investigator's conclusions, others concluding it was elaborate fraud. The case has inspired books, documentaries, and horror films, ensuring that Maurice Grosse and Lyon Playfair's 18 months in that council house remain one of the most discussed investigations in paranormal research history. Their partnership showed how different backgrounds and perspectives could complement each other in investigating the unexplained. Grosse's technical skills and emotional investment, combined with Playfair's research abilities and experience, created a formidable team. Their dedication to the Hodgson family, their willingness to invite skeptical observers, and their honest acknowledgement when children faked incidents demonstrated integrity, even while their conclusions remained controversial. Whether the Enfield poltergeist was genuine paranormal phenomena, children's elaborate deception, or something more complex involving both real and faked events, the investigation by Grosse and Playfair set standards for how such cases should be approached. Their extensive documentation, their attempts at controlled conditions given the chaotic circumstances, and their commitment to investigating rather than either blindly believing or reflexively dismissing, offers lessons for anyone studying unusual claims. Maurice Grosse and Lyon Playfair's names will forever be linked with the Enfield poltergeist, a case that continues to divide believers and skeptics decades after it ended. Their investigation demonstrated both the possibilities and challenges of paranormal research, the frustration of ambiguous evidence, and the way personal motivations, methodological limitations, and genuine mysteries combine in attempts to understand phenomena that resist simple explanation. In a quiet library filled with filing cabinets and carefully organized folders, an elderly gentleman with silver hair opened yet another case file on a haunted location. Peter Underwood, president of the Ghost Club and Britain's most dedicated chronicler of hauntings, had spent over 50 years systematically documenting supernatural reports across the United Kingdom. Unlike the sensational ghost hunters on television or the dramatic investigators seeking confrontation with spirits, Underwood approached his work with the patient precision of an archivist, creating a database of British hauntings that remains unmatched for comprehensiveness and careful documentation. Born in 1923 in Essex, Peter Underwood claimed his first encounter with the paranormal occurred when he was 9 years old. He reportedly saw an apparition in his family's home, an experience that sparked curiosity rather than fear. But unlike many who had childhood paranormal experiences and became either believers or skeptics, Underwood became something rarer. An investigator focused on documentation rather than proof, on preservation rather than persuasion. He joined the Ghost Club in 1960, attracted by its extraordinary history. Founded in 1862, the Ghost Club was one of the world's oldest organizations dedicated to investigating paranormal phenomena. Previous members had included Charles Dickens and Arthur Conan Doyle, giving the club both literary and cultural significance. When Underwood became president in 1962, he transformed it from a Victorian gentlemen's club into a serious investigative organization with modern methods and standards. Underwood's investigation methodology was systematic and understated. When reports of a haunting reached him, he would begin with historical research, examining property records, death certificates, and local archives for any events that might explain reported phenomena. He would interview witnesses carefully, noting consistency and contradictions, assessing credibility without automatically accepting or dismissing accounts. He would visit locations multiple times, understanding that atmospheric conditions, lighting, and observer psychology all affected perception. Unlike later generations of paranormal investigators with their arrays of electronic equipment, Underwood brought minimal tools to investigations. A notebook for detailed observations, a camera for documentation, a thermometer for measuring temperature variations, and a tape recorder for capturing sounds. He distrusted the proliferation of gadgets, arguing that understanding hauntings required patient observation rather than electronic detection. He believed genuine phenomena would reveal themselves through careful witness over time, not through meter readings or equipment spikes. His approach to documenting hauntings emphasized patience and multiple visits. He understood that most haunted locations didn't perform on demand, that phenomena occurred sporadically rather than constantly. He would return to sites repeatedly, at different times of day and in different seasons, building a comprehensive picture of reported activity. This thorough approach meant individual investigations might take months or even years, but the resulting documentation was far more reliable than single-night sensational accounts. Underwood investigated over 1,000 haunted locations during his decades of research. These ranged from famous sites like the Tower of London and Hampton Court Palace to countless obscure houses, pubs, churches, and theaters across Britain. He treated each investigation with equal seriousness, whether documenting royal ghosts or recording the experiences of ordinary people in suburban homes. His goal was comprehensive documentation of British supernatural folklore, preserving accounts for future researchers regardless of whether ghosts were real or cultural constructs. His books reflected this archival approach. A gazetteer of British ghosts and a gazetteer of Scottish and Irish ghosts were organized geographically, providing detailed information about hundreds of haunted locations. These weren't sensational accounts but reference works, listing addresses, providing historical background, describing reported phenomena, and citing sources. Researchers could use Underwood's gazetteers to find information about hauntings in their own areas, complete with directions and context. The Ghost Club under Underwood's leadership maintained high standards for investigation and membership. Members included scientists, historians, psychologists, and serious researchers rather than sensation seekers or credulous believers. The club investigated claims with healthy skepticism, always looking for natural explanations before accepting paranormal ones. They published their findings in journals and bulletins, making research available to other investigators and maintaining standards of documentation that many other groups lacked. Underwood's relationship with the media was careful and principled. He gave interviews and appeared on television programs, but always emphasizing evidence and careful research over entertainment and drama. He publicly criticized sensationalist ghost hunting shows, arguing they damaged serious research by portraying paranormal investigation as entertainment rather than inquiry. He worried that television ghost hunters cared more about dramatic footage and viewer ratings than truth. His personal beliefs about ghosts were remarkably nuanced for someone who spent decades investigating them. He didn't claim to know whether apparitions were conscious entities, residual energy patterns, psychological phenomena, or something else entirely. He insisted that careful documentation should precede theorizing, that researchers needed far more data before developing comprehensive explanations. This agnostic approach frustrated believers wanting validation and skeptics wanting definitive debunking, but it reflected intellectual honesty about the limitations of current understanding. Underwood investigated many of Britain's most famous hauntings. At the Tower of London, he documented numerous accounts of spectral figures, from Anne Boleyn to the princes in the tower, carefully separating verified historical reports from later embellishments and tourist folklore. At Borley Rectory, he examined the site after Harry Price's controversial investigations, interviewing witnesses who had lived through the famous haunting and researching the property's history with fresh eyes. His investigation of Chingle Hall in Lancashire demonstrated his methodical approach. Reputedly one of England's most haunted houses, Chingle Hall had reports of numerous phenomena. Underwood spent multiple nights there over several years, documenting temperature fluctuations, unusual sounds, and witness experiences. He interviewed dozens of people who claimed experiences at the location, checking their accounts against each other and against the building's history. His resulting documentation provided the most comprehensive account of Chingle Hall's haunting available. Underwood's research into phantom hitchhikers showed his scholarly approach to folklore and paranormal claims. He collected dozens of accounts of ghostly figures appearing to motorists on British roads, mapped their locations, analyzed patterns in when and where they occurred, and tried to correlate them with historical accidents or deaths. While he couldn't prove these phenomena were supernatural, his careful documentation preserved accounts that might otherwise have been forgotten, creating a valuable resource for future researchers studying this particular type of ghost story. He wrote over 50 books during his lifetime, maintaining impressive productivity while ensuring quality and accuracy. His writing style was clear and accessible, avoiding academic jargon while maintaining scholarly standards. He presented evidence fairly, acknowledged when cases lacked sufficient documentation, and admitted when he didn't have answers to questions. This honesty and humility distinguished his work from more sensational accounts. Underwood's later years saw increasing concern about the commercialization of paranormal investigation. He worried that television programs and tourist attractions exploited haunted locations for profit rather than studying them seriously. He argued for preserving historical sites and their ghost stories as cultural heritage rather than entertainment commodities. He advocated for treating haunted locations with respect, recognizing their historical value regardless of whether their supernatural reputations were justified. Critics accused Underwood of being too credulous, of accepting witness testimony without sufficient skepticism, of not investigating natural explanations thoroughly enough. Skeptics argued that his extensive documentation of hauntings gave credibility to phenomena that probably had ordinary explanations, that he was essentially cataloging folklore and misperception rather than genuine supernatural activity. But defenders pointed out that Underwood never claimed definitive proof of anything supernatural. He documented reports, preserved accounts, interviewed witnesses, and created resources for future researchers. Whether the ghosts he documented were real entities or cultural constructs, his work preserved an important aspect of British cultural history. If scholars centuries hence want to study 20th century British ghost beliefs and haunted location folklore, Underwood's books will be essential primary sources. Peter Underwood died in 2014 at age 91, having devoted over 50 years to investigating and documenting British hauntings. His passing marked the end of an era, the last of the old-school ghost hunters who approached paranormal investigation as scholarship rather than entertainment, as cultural preservation rather than proof-seeking. The Ghost Club continues operating, but its character has inevitably changed in an age of reality television and social media paranormal investigation. His legacy lives in his extensive publications, in the Ghost Club's continued operation, and in the hundreds of haunted locations he documented with care and precision. His patient, undramatic approach to investigation seems almost quaint now, in an era of night vision cameras and confrontational demon hunting. But serious paranormal researchers recognize that Underwood's methodology, thorough historical research, careful witness interviews, multiple site visits, healthy skepticism, remains essential regardless of technological advances. Underwood represented a particularly British tradition of ghost hunting, understated, scholarly, concerned more with preservation than sensation. He understood that most hauntings weren't spectacular but subtle, that ghosts were part of Britain's historical and cultural landscape, deserving respectful documentation. Whether future researchers conclude that ghosts are genuine phenomena or cultural folklore, they'll rely on the meticulous work of investigators like Peter Underwood, who preserved accounts with care, precision, and respect for both the living who reported experiences and the dead who might somehow still linger. In a darkened hallway of a supposedly demon-infested building, a figure stands with arms outstretched, his voice echoing through empty rooms with a challenge. "If you're here, show yourself. Do something. I'm not afraid of you." This confrontational approach to paranormal investigation, combining bravado with genuine fear, made Zach Bagans one of the most recognizable faces in modern ghost hunting. Love him or hate him, his impact on how millions of people think about paranormal investigation is undeniable. Zach Bagans was born in 1977 in Washington, D.C., growing up in a world very different from the Victorian spiritualists or mid-century parapsychologists who pioneered ghost hunting. He came of age with MTV, extreme sports, and reality television, cultural influences that would shape his approach to investigating the supernatural. After studying film at Western Michigan University, he worked as a wedding DJ in Las Vegas, not an obvious path to becoming one of paranormal investigation's most controversial figures. Bagans's entry into ghost hunting came from a personal experience. In 2002, while living in an apartment building in Trenton, Michigan, he encountered what he described as a dark, malevolent entity, a figure he saw in his hallway that filled him with overwhelming dread. This experience, whether genuinely paranormal or a product of sleep paralysis and suggestion, transformed his life direction. He became obsessed with understanding what he'd experienced, and whether entities like the one he encountered were real. In 2004, Bagans and his friends Nick Groff and Aaron Goodwin began documenting their paranormal investigations, eventually creating the documentary Ghost Adventures that would launch their television career. The original documentary showcased their investigation of several haunted locations, capturing what they claimed was compelling evidence of supernatural activity. But more importantly, it established the template for their future approach. Lockdown overnight investigations in allegedly haunted buildings, confrontational provocation of spirits, and dramatic personal reactions to experiences. When Ghost Adventures became a Travel Channel series in 2008, it revolutionized paranormal television. Unlike Ghost Hunters, with its blue-collar, debunking-first approach, Ghost Adventures embraced drama, fear, and confrontation. Bagans's on-camera persona combined bravado with vulnerability. He would challenge spirits aggressively one moment, then react with genuine-seeming terror when something unexpected occurred. This emotional volatility made for compelling television and helped the show build a devoted following. Bagans's investigation style is distinctive and controversial. He employs what he calls provocation, deliberately attempting to anger spirits through insults, challenges, and confrontational behavior. The theory is that negative entities feed on fear and anger, so provoking them increases the likelihood they'll manifest. Critics argue this approach is disrespectful to both the dead and the living, that it sensationalizes investigation into entertainment, and that it encourages amateur investigators to adopt dangerous practices. The show's format contributed to its success. Each episode follows a similar structure: research and interviews, daytime walkthrough of the location, equipment setup, and then the lockdown. Hours spent in the location overnight with cameras rolling. The use of night vision cameras, dramatic music, and careful editing creates an atmosphere of constant tension. Whether phenomena are genuine or enhanced through production techniques, the show delivers entertainment that has kept audiences watching for over 15 seasons. Bagans has embraced technology enthusiastically, using an ever-expanding array of devices supposedly designed to detect paranormal activity. Beyond standard EMF meters and digital recorders, the show has featured spirit boxes, devices that rapidly scan radio frequencies, supposedly allowing spirits to communicate, SLS cameras, structured light sensors that create stick figure overlays, puck devices, REM pods, and various custom-built gadgets. Critics argue that none of these devices has been scientifically validated for paranormal detection, that their use represents pseudoscience masquerading as investigation. His most significant non-television project is the Haunted Museum in Las Vegas, which opened in 2017. Located in a historic mansion, the museum houses Bagans's extensive collection of supposedly haunted or cursed objects. The collection includes Ed and Lorraine Warren's mirror from the Conjuring house, the Dybbuk box, allegedly one of the most haunted objects in the world, furniture from murdered homes, and countless other artifacts Bagans has acquired during his investigations. The museum has become a popular tourist attraction, though critics argue it commodifies tragedy and exploits people's fears for profit. Bagans has written several books, including Dark World, Into the Shadows with the lead investigator of the Ghost Adventures crew, which provides background on his cases and his philosophy of paranormal investigation. His writing reveals someone who genuinely believes in the phenomena he investigates, who sees himself engaged in something more significant than entertainment, documenting and confronting genuine evil that threatens innocent people. His on-camera persona has evolved over the show's long run. Early episodes showed a more uncertain, exploratory Bagans. Later seasons feature someone more confident, more aggressive, more willing to make definitive claims about demonic presence and spiritual warfare. Whether this represents genuine conviction or character development for television purposes is debated. His sometimes melodramatic reactions to evidence and his certainty about paranormal explanations for ambiguous occurrences frustrate skeptics and even some believers who prefer more measured approaches. Bagans has faced numerous controversies. He's been accused of faking evidence, of using production techniques to enhance drama, of making unsubstantiated claims, and of being more interested in entertainment than truth. Former cast member Nick Groff left the show under reportedly contentious circumstances. Some locations the show has investigated have complained about misrepresentation or claimed the show exaggerated their hauntings. But Bagans has also brought unprecedented attention and resources to paranormal investigation. The success of Ghost Adventures demonstrated that there was enormous audience appetite for paranormal content, leading to a proliferation of similar shows and increased interest in ghost hunting generally. His willingness to investigate dangerous or disturbing locations, to spend entire nights in places most people wouldn't enter in daylight, shows commitment regardless of whether his methods and conclusions are scientifically sound. His influence on popular culture extends beyond the show. Bagans has inspired countless amateur paranormal investigators, for better or worse. Some have adopted his methods and equipment, attempting their own investigations with varying degrees of care and safety. The show has popularized specific investigation techniques and made certain haunted locations famous worldwide. Whether this popularization helps or harms serious paranormal research depends largely on one's perspective. Bagans's relationship with skeptics is contentious. He's dismissed scientific criticism of his methods, arguing that skeptics are closed-minded and refuse to accept evidence that challenges their worldview. Skeptics respond that Bagans lacks scientific training, makes claims unsupported by his evidence, and confuses entertainment with investigation. The mutual contempt between Bagans and prominent skeptics has become part of the broader cultural divide over paranormal claims. Yet Bagans has also worked with some researchers and clergy who take paranormal claims seriously. He's consulted with demonologists, brought in priests to bless locations, and collaborated with other investigators. His museum includes extensive documentation and artifacts that, regardless of their supernatural properties, represent significant cultural and historical interest. Whether approached as genuine paranormal evidence or as fascinating objects of folklore and belief, the collection has value. Zach Bagans represents modern ghost hunting in all its complexity. A mixture of genuine curiosity and showmanship, sincere belief and entertainment value, cultural fascination, and commercial exploitation. He's made paranormal investigation accessible to mainstream audiences, while also making serious researchers cringe at his methods. He's brought resources and attention to the field, while also arguably lowering standards for what constitutes evidence. Whether Zach Bagans is a dedicated investigator documenting real phenomena or an entertainer who discovered a profitable niche, his impact on paranormal investigation is undeniable. He's introduced millions of people to ghost hunting, inspired thousands to conduct their own investigations, and kept paranormal content on television for over 15 years. The debates about his methods, his evidence, and his conclusions will continue, but his influence on how a generation thinks about ghosts and paranormal investigation is already secured. In the history of ghost hunting, Bagans represents the full embrace of entertainment values in paranormal investigation. Whether this represents evolution or degradation of the field depends on whether you value reaching mass audiences or maintaining investigative integrity, whether you prioritize dramatic content or careful methodology, whether you believe the ends justify the means or that means matter as much as ends. In a university classroom, a professor stands before students holding something unexpected, an EMF meter, explaining not how to hunt ghosts, but how to think critically about paranormal claims, how to evaluate evidence, and how to conduct investigations with intellectual honesty. Loyd Auerbach brings something rare to paranormal investigation: actual academic credentials in parapsychology, decades of careful research, and a commitment to elevating ghost hunting from hobby to something approaching scientific discipline. Loyd Auerbach was born in 1956 and grew up fascinated by both science and the unexplained. Unlike many paranormal investigators who come to the field through personal experiences or popular culture, Auerbach approached it academically. He earned his master's degree in parapsychology from John F. Kennedy University in 1981, one of the few accredited programs in the field. This formal education gave him something most ghost hunters lack: training in research methodology, statistics, psychology, and the history of psychical research. Auerbach founded the Office of Paranormal Investigations in 1989, creating an organization dedicated to investigating paranormal claims with scientific methodology and skeptical rigor. Unlike media-driven ghost hunting operations, OPI focused on helping people understand their experiences, whether those experiences had paranormal or conventional explanations. The organization emphasized education, investigation, and advancing understanding rather than entertainment or proof-seeking. His investigation approach emphasizes careful methodology and critical thinking. When someone reports paranormal activity, Auerbach begins with extensive interviews, understanding that human perception and psychology are complex. He investigates potential conventional explanations, environmental factors, psychological states, suggestion, and misperception. Only after eliminating reasonable normal explanations does he consider paranormal possibilities, and even then, he's cautious about drawing definitive conclusions. Auerbach is particularly critical of the equipment obsession in modern ghost hunting. He argues that electromagnetic field meters, designed to detect faulty wiring, haven't been validated for detecting ghosts. Spirit boxes that scan radio frequencies produce random words that investigators interpret as meaningful communication. A perfect example of pareidolia and confirmation bias. Most ghost hunting equipment, in Auerbach's view, provides data that tells us more about the environment than about paranormal activity. He emphasizes that the most important tool in paranormal investigation is the human observer. But only when properly trained to recognize cognitive biases, understand psychology, and document observations carefully. Auerbach teaches investigators to question their assumptions, consider alternative explanations, and recognize the difference between, "I don't know what that was," and "that must be a ghost." This intellectual humility is rare in a field where certainty about paranormal explanations is often the default. Auerbach has written several books, including ESP, Hauntings and Poltergeists, a parapsychologist's handbook, which provides both theoretical background and practical advice for investigating paranormal claims. His writing is accessible but maintains academic standards, citing research, acknowledging uncertainties, and presenting multiple perspectives. He's also written about ghosts in popular culture and contributed to academic discussions about the role of paranormal belief in society. His academic background gives him credibility that many paranormal investigators lack. He can discuss the history of psychical research, reference peer-reviewed studies, explain statistical methodology, and contextualize contemporary ghost hunting within broader traditions of investigating unusual claims. This knowledge base allows him to bridge the gap between academic parapsychology and popular ghost hunting, though he's often frustrated by both communities. Academics who dismiss all field investigation as unscientific, and popular ghost hunters who ignore decades of research and methodology. Auerbach teaches courses on parapsychology and paranormal investigation, training students to think critically about extraordinary claims. He emphasizes the importance of understanding psychology, recognizing cognitive biases, controlling conditions, and documenting observations carefully. His students learn about the history of psychical research, famous cases and their controversies, and how to evaluate evidence. Many go on to conduct their own investigations with more sophistication than typical amateur ghost hunters. He's been a frequent guest on radio shows, podcasts, and television programs, though he's selective about appearances. Auerbach avoids shows that sensationalize paranormal claims or that aren't interested in serious discussion of methodology and evidence. He's more likely to appear on programs that allow for nuanced discussion of complex issues than on shows looking for dramatic ghost hunting footage. This selectivity means he has less mainstream name recognition than television personalities, but more credibility within research communities. Auerbach is also involved in mentalism and magic, understanding how psychological tricks and illusions work. This knowledge makes him effective at detecting fraud and understanding how people can be deceived. Like Houdini before him, understanding deception makes Auerbach better equipped to identify genuine anomalies when they occur. He argues that every paranormal investigator should study magic and psychology to understand how human perception can be manipulated. His investigation of poltergeist cases emphasizes the human element. Auerbach approaches these cases understanding that they often center on individuals under psychological stress, particularly adolescents. Rather than immediately assuming supernatural causes, he investigates the psychological and social dynamics, looking for triggers and patterns. Sometimes this leads to conventional explanations. Other times he concludes something genuinely anomalous is occurring, though he's always cautious about claiming definitive proof. Auerbach is critical of much contemporary ghost hunting, particularly the confrontational provocation approach popularized by shows like Ghost Adventures. He argues this method is disrespectful, potentially dangerous, and scientifically worthless. Even if spirits exist and can be provoked, deliberately angering them for entertainment purposes violates ethical standards for investigation. The emotional reactions this approach generates tell us more about investigators' psychology than about paranormal phenomena. He emphasizes the importance of interviewing skills in paranormal investigation. Understanding what people actually experienced, distinguishing between what they perceived and how they interpreted it, and recognizing when suggestion or expectation might have influenced perception requires training and practice. Auerbach teaches investigators to conduct careful interviews that elicit detailed information without leading witnesses or influencing their accounts. His approach to electronic voice phenomena is measured. While he acknowledges that some EVP recordings are intriguing and difficult to explain conventionally, he emphasizes the importance of considering all possible sources. Stray radio signals, environmental sounds, equipment artifacts, and the human tendency to hear words in random noise. He advocates for careful analysis and acknowledgement of ambiguity, rather than immediately claiming every unclear sound is a spirit voice. Auerbach has investigated numerous cases over his decades in the field, though he avoids the dramatic claims and publicity seeking that characterize some investigators. He's more interested in understanding patterns across many cases than in promoting individual investigations as proof of the paranormal. This approach is less exciting for media coverage, but more valuable for advancing actual knowledge. He's frustrated by the state of modern paranormal investigation, feeling that television has simultaneously increased interest and lowered standards. The proliferation of ghost hunting shows has inspired thousands of people to investigate hauntings, which could be positive if those investigators were properly trained. Instead, most adopt the methods they see on television. Equipment-heavy, explanation-light approaches that generate dramatic footage but little reliable information. Yet Auerbach remains optimistic about the potential for paranormal research to advance. He believes that with proper methodology, careful documentation, and intellectual honesty, investigators can make genuine progress in understanding unusual experiences. Whether those experiences reflect paranormal phenomena or complex interactions between human psychology and environment, understanding them requires serious study rather than entertainment-focused dramatics. Loyd Auerbach represents what paranormal investigation could be if it fully embraced scientific methodology and academic standards. His work demonstrates that investigating unusual claims doesn't require abandoning critical thinking or accepting every unexplained occurrence as definitely paranormal. His emphasis on education, methodology, and intellectual humility offers a model for researchers who want to advance understanding rather than just collect dramatic stories. In the history of paranormal investigation, Auerbach stands as a bridge between academic parapsychology and popular ghost hunting. He respects the traditions of psychical research while engaging with contemporary investigation. He values both rigorous methodology and compassionate assistance to people reporting unusual experiences. Whether ghosts are real or experiences are misunderstood natural phenomena, Auerbach's approach provides the best path forward for anyone seriously interested in understanding rather than simply believing or debunking. His lasting contribution may be less about specific investigations and more about raising standards, educating investigators, and demonstrating that paranormal research can be conducted with both open-mindedness and critical thinking. In a field prone to extremes of credulous belief and closed-minded skepticism, Auerbach's measured, evidence-based approach offers a third path. One that might not generate television ratings, but that advances actual understanding of the fascinating, frustrating mysteries people continue to report experiencing. In a darkened house, two investigators sit quietly, not shouting challenges or provocations, but speaking gently to whatever might be present. "We're here to help," Amy Bruni says softly. "We want to understand what you need." This compassionate approach to paranormal investigation, focusing on assistance rather than confrontation, represents a different philosophy in modern ghost hunting. Amy Bruni and Adam Barry have built their careers on the idea that ghosts, if they exist, deserve respect and empathy rather than aggression and exploitation. Amy Bruni grew up in a haunted house, or at least that's what her family believed. Born in 1976, she experienced phenomena from childhood that most people would find terrifying, but that she learned to live with. Unexplained sounds, objects moving, the feeling of unseen presences. These became normal parts of her life. Rather than developing fear, she became curious. Who or what was sharing her home, and what did they want? This childhood experience shaped her approach to paranormal investigation. When she joined the cast of Ghost Hunters in 2008, she brought a perspective different from the typical ghost hunter persona. She wasn't trying to prove ghosts existed or challenge them to show themselves. She approached investigations with the assumption that if spirits were present, they were likely confused, scared, or seeking something. Emotional states she could relate to rather than threats to be confronted. Adam Barry's path to paranormal investigation came through different experiences. Born in 1977, he initially pursued a career in production and design before becoming fascinated by paranormal investigation. He joined Ghost Hunters in 2010, bringing creative skills and technical knowledge to investigations. But more importantly, he shared Bruni's philosophy that investigation should be respectful and that the goal should be understanding rather than just documenting phenomena. When both left Ghost Hunters in 2014, they collaborated on Kindred Spirits, which premiered in 2016. The show's premise was explicitly different from most paranormal television. Rather than just investigating haunted locations, they would attempt to help spirits move on or resolve whatever kept them attached to earthly locations. Each episode focused on a family or individual experiencing paranormal activity, with Bruni and Barry working to understand the root cause and find resolution. Their investigation methodology emphasizes research, empathy, and historical context. Before arriving at a location, they thoroughly research its history, looking for deaths, tragedies, or significant events that might explain hauntings. They interview witnesses extensively, not just about phenomena, but about the emotional impact of their experiences. They recognize that whether ghosts are real or not, people's fear and distress are genuine and deserve compassionate response. Bruni brings particular sensitivity to investigations, describing herself as having empathic abilities that help her sense emotional atmosphere and connect with potential spirits. While skeptics might dismiss such claims, her approach creates an investigation style that's less aggressive and more contemplative than typical ghost hunting. She spends time in locations simply being present and open rather than constantly provoking or demanding evidence. Barry contributes technical expertise and creative problem-solving. He designs experiments, manages equipment, and analyzes evidence carefully. but he also brings warmth and humor to investigations, understanding that paranormal investigation doesn't have to be grim and frightening. His approach makes the work accessible and less intimidating, both for viewers and for families experiencing hauntings. What distinguishes their work is the explicit goal of helping rather than just documenting. If a family is frightened by phenomena in their home, Bruni and Barry don't just capture evidence and leave. They attempt communication with spirits, try to understand what might be causing the haunting, and sometimes bring in mediums, historians, or other specialists to help resolve the situation. They might suggest house blessings, historical acknowledgement of past tragedies, or simply providing information that helps families understand and cope with their experiences. This helping approach has precedence in paranormal investigation, but isn't common in television ghost hunting, where dramatic evidence and scary encounters typically take precedence over resolution. Bruni and Barry's willingness to prioritize their clients' well-being over dramatic footage represents a different set of values in an entertainment-driven field. They've investigated a wide range of locations, from private homes to historic buildings, from famous haunted sites to obscure properties. Their cases have included helping a family understand phenomena in their historic home, investigating residual hauntings at Civil War sites, and attempting communication with spirits at locations where tragic deaths occurred. The variety of cases showcases their adaptability and commitment to each unique situation. Bruni and Barry's relationship with equipment is more measured than many paranormal television shows. They use standard ghost hunting tools, EMF meters, digital recorders, cameras, but don't rely on arrays of gadgets or make definitive claims based on equipment readings. They acknowledge that equipment provides data points, but that human experience and historical context matter more for understanding hauntings. This balanced approach avoids both the equipment fetishism of some shows and the complete dismissal of technology. Their on-camera dynamic is collaborative and friendly rather than dramatic or confrontational. They work as equals, respecting each other's perspectives and contributions. This partnership models how investigation can be cooperative rather than competitive, focused on team problem-solving rather than individual heroics. Their genuine friendship is apparent and makes their show feel more authentic than productions where personalities seem manufactured for television. The family-friendly nature of their investigations is intentional. Unlike shows that emphasize terror and demonic threats, Kindred Spirits presents paranormal investigation as something interesting and sometimes mysterious, but not necessarily frightening. This approach makes paranormal content accessible to viewers who might be interested, but not wanting graphic scares. It also reflects their belief that fear-mongering about the paranormal is neither necessary nor helpful. Critics of their approach argue that the helping framework is condescending, assuming spirits need or want assistance from living investigators. Skeptics point out that if ghosts don't exist, then the help being provided is really just making families feel better about normal phenomena they've misinterpreted. Some paranormal purists feel the compassionate approach is too soft, that serious investigation requires more aggressive evidence gathering. But defenders argue that even if ghosts aren't real, helping people feel comfortable in their homes has value. If a family is frightened by sounds they attribute to ghosts, and Bruni and Barry's investigation helps them feel at peace, whether through paranormal explanation or conventional reassurance, that's a positive outcome. The compassionate approach acknowledges that paranormal investigation always involves living people who deserve respect and support. Bruni has written about her experiences, co-authoring books that combine personal stories with practical advice for people experiencing paranormal phenomena. Her writing is accessible and warm, avoiding sensationalism while acknowledging the fear and confusion that hauntings can cause. She emphasizes that whether phenomena are paranormal or not, people's experiences are real to them and deserve validation. Both investigators maintain active social media presences, engaging with fans, sharing behind-the-scenes content, and providing updates on their work. This accessibility creates a community around their investigations, with followers who share their compassionate approach to the paranormal. The community they've built values respect, empathy, and open-minded inquiry, rather than aggressive proof-seeking or theatrical dramatics. They've also worked on other projects beyond Kindred Spirits, including special episodes investigating famous haunted locations and collaborating with other investigators. Their willingness to work with others in the paranormal community demonstrates their collaborative spirit and their belief that investigation is more effective when researchers share information and approaches. Amy Bruni and Adam Barry represent a particular current in modern paranormal investigation, one that prioritizes emotional intelligence, historical understanding, and compassionate assistance over dramatic confrontation and sensational evidence. Whether their approach advances genuine understanding of paranormal phenomena is debatable, but it certainly provides a more empathetic model for how investigators might engage with both spirits and the living people affected by reported hauntings. In the history of ghost hunting, they stand as alternatives to the aggressive, fear-based approach that has dominated much paranormal television. They demonstrate that investigation can be gentle, that research can be compassionate, and that entertainment value doesn't require exploitation of fear. Whether ghosts are real or not, their approach acknowledges the humanity of everyone involved in paranormal experiences. The living who are frightened or confused, and potentially the dead who might be equally lost and seeking connection. Their lasting contribution may be showing that there are multiple valid approaches to paranormal investigation, that the confrontational method popularized by some shows isn't the only or necessarily the best way to investigate hauntings. By modeling respect, empathy, and genuine care for the people they help, Bruni and Barry offer an alternative vision for what paranormal investigation could be. Not warfare against darkness, but compassionate exploration of mysteries that touch human experience in profound ways. On an October evening in 2004, television viewers encountered something unusual in the landscape of paranormal programming. Two Rhode Island plumbers, not scientists or dramatic performers, but regular working guys, were investigating a haunted location with flashlights and recording equipment. When they found what they thought might be evidence, they got excited. When they discovered logical explanations, they admitted it openly. This straightforward, blue-collar approach to ghost hunting would launch Ghost Hunters into a phenomenon that ran for 11 seasons and fundamentally transformed paranormal investigation into mainstream entertainment. Jason Hawes was born in 1971 and grew up experiencing what he believed were paranormal phenomena. Rather than dismiss these experiences or become overwhelmed by fear, he became curious. In his 20s, working as a plumber in Rhode Island, he began investigating reportedly haunted locations in his spare time. In 1990, he founded the Atlantic Paranormal Society, or TAPS, initially just a small group of friends investigating local hauntings for free, trying to help people understand unusual experiences in their homes. Grant Wilson, born in 1974, had similar interests and experiences. He met Hawes through paranormal investigation circles in Rhode Island and joined TAPS in the late 1990s. The partnership between Hawes and Wilson would define the organization's approach and eventually their television show. Two regular guys, both with day jobs as plumbers, who investigated ghosts not as a career, but as a calling, helping people understand and cope with phenomena they couldn't explain. TAPS's approach was revolutionary for its time, though it seems obvious in hindsight. They would investigate claims of hauntings, but their first goal was always debunking, looking for logical, conventional explanations before accepting paranormal ones. If a homeowner reported mysterious banging sounds and TAPS discovered old pipes that expanded and contracted with temperature changes, they would explain this honestly, even though it meant no dramatic paranormal evidence. This commitment to finding normal explanations when they existed distinguished TAPS from investigators who seemed eager to declare everything paranormal. Their investigation methodology combined common sense with technology. They would interview witnesses carefully, noting consistency and specifics. They would examine locations thoroughly during daylight, looking for sources of sounds, drafts that might move curtains, reflective surfaces that might create illusions, and any environmental factors that could explain phenomena. They brought equipment, EMF meters, digital thermometers, infrared cameras, digital audio recorders, not as definitive ghost detectors, but as tools to document environmental conditions and capture potential evidence. The breakthrough came when the Sci-Fi Channel decided to create a reality show following TAPS investigations. The pilot aired in October 2004, and ghost hunters quickly found an audience hungry for paranormal content that seemed more authentic than obviously staged horror shows. The program's format was straightforward. Research and interviews, daytime walkthrough of the location, setting up equipment, investigation during night hours, evidence review, and final reveal to the client about findings. What made Ghost Hunters successful wasn't just the paranormal content, but Hawes and Wilson's everyman appeal. They didn't claim special psychic abilities or advanced scientific credentials. They were plumbers who brought the same problem-solving approach to ghost hunting that they used in their day jobs. Systematic investigation, looking for obvious causes, and honest reporting of results. Viewers could relate to them in ways they couldn't relate to academics or theatrical personalities. The show popularized specific investigation techniques that became standard in paranormal research. The use of EMF meters to detect electromagnetic field fluctuations, digital recorders for capturing electronic voice phenomena, infrared cameras for seeing in darkness, and baseline readings to establish normal environmental conditions. All these became familiar to mainstream audiences through Ghost Hunters. Hardware stores began selling ghost hunting kits, and amateur investigation teams formed across America, inspired by TAPS's accessible approach. Hawes and Wilson's on-camera dynamic was casual and often humorous, acknowledging the absurdity of grown men running around dark buildings looking for ghosts. They would joke with each other, react authentically to unexpected sounds or experiences, and admit when they were scared. This authenticity, whether completely genuine or partially performed for cameras, made them likable and relatable. They seemed like guys you might know, not distant celebrities or eccentric researchers. Their commitment to debunking first created a template that many subsequent paranormal shows followed, at least superficially. When ghost hunters found a logical explanation for reported phenomena, they presented it clearly and often seemed relieved. They understood that helping clients meant explaining what was happening, not insisting on paranormal explanations when conventional ones sufficed. This approach built credibility. When they did present evidence they couldn't explain, viewers were more inclined to take it seriously. The show's success spawned multiple spin-offs, including Ghost Hunters International, Ghost Hunters Academy, and various special episodes. TAPS became a brand with merchandise, books, and nationwide recognition. Hawes and Wilson wrote books about their experiences, offering advice for people experiencing paranormal phenomena and for amateur investigators wanting to conduct their own research. They became, in effect, the faces of mainstream paranormal investigation. However, controversies emerged as the show's success continued. Some former cast members left under contentious circumstances, alleging that evidence was being manipulated or fabricated for dramatic effect. Questions arose about whether some investigations were staged or enhanced for television. The pressure to deliver compelling content, every episode created incentives that potentially conflicted with honest investigation. Hawes and Wilson defended their integrity, but the accusations damaged the show's reputation among some viewers and investigators. Grant Wilson left the show in 2012, citing a desire to spend more time with family and pursue other interests. His departure changed the show's dynamic significantly, as the Hawes-Wilson partnership had been central to its appeal. Wilson occasionally returned for special episodes, but his regular presence was missed by longtime viewers. Hawes continued leading investigations with other team members, but the chemistry was different. The show ended in 2016 after 11 seasons, though it was revived in 2019 with Hawes returning and Wilson making occasional appearances. The revival demonstrated the show's lasting appeal and the audience's continued interest in the TAPS approach to paranormal investigation. Whether the revival captures the original's authenticity or represents nostalgia-driven programming remains debated among fans. Hawes has continued paranormal investigation and has worked on other projects, including consulting on haunted attractions and paranormal-themed entertainment. He maintains that TAPS' mission remains helping people understand and cope with paranormal experiences, though the organization's structure and activities have evolved over the years. The influence of ghost hunters on paranormal investigation culture is enormous and complicated. On the positive side, the show demonstrated that ordinary people could investigate hauntings, that systematic methodology mattered, and that honesty about findings was important. It made paranormal investigation accessible and relatable to mainstream audiences, inspiring thousands to explore the field themselves. On the negative side, the show's success encouraged a proliferation of paranormal programming that often copied its format while abandoning its commitment to debunking. The emphasis on equipment created a culture where ghost hunting became synonymous with carrying electronic devices, regardless of whether those devices were actually useful for detecting paranormal phenomena. The need for dramatic content encouraged some investigators to prioritize entertainment over honest inquiry. Ghost hunters also established patterns that became problematic. The focus on night investigations in darkness, while atmospheric for television, isn't necessary for paranormal research and may actually impair observation. The emphasis on EMF readings as evidence of paranormal activity, despite no scientific basis for this correlation, became accepted practice among many amateur investigators. The show's influence was so strong that its methods became standard, even when those methods weren't necessarily sound. Yet for all its controversies and limitations, ghost hunters represented something significant in the evolution of paranormal investigation. Hawes and Wilson showed that ghost hunting didn't require special gifts or academic credentials, that regular people could approach the field seriously while maintaining honesty and humor. They demonstrated that helping people was more important than proving the paranormal existed, that explaining phenomena was valuable regardless of whether explanations were conventional or supernatural. In the history of paranormal investigation, Jason Hawes and Grant Wilson stand as the democratizers, the figures who brought ghost hunting from specialty interest to mainstream entertainment. They created a template that influenced a generation of investigators and shaped how millions of people think about ghosts, hauntings, and paranormal research. Whether their legacy is mostly positive or negative depends on perspective, but their impact is undeniable. The Roto-Rooter plumbers who became paranormal television stars represent a uniquely American story. Regular working guys who turned a hobby into a phenomenon, who built a business around investigating claims that mainstream science dismisses, and who maintained at least the appearance of integrity in a field prone to fraud and sensationalism. Whether they truly advanced understanding of paranormal phenomena or simply created entertaining television, that inspired both serious research and ridiculous mimicry. They changed the landscape of ghost hunting permanently. Their greatest contribution may be showing that paranormal investigation could be mainstream, that people from all backgrounds could participate, and that the field could maintain some standards while also being entertaining. The challenge for contemporary investigators is building on the accessibility and methodology that ghost hunters demonstrated, while avoiding the pitfalls of television production and commercial pressures that potentially compromised the show's integrity. Jason Hawes and Grant Wilson opened a door that millions walked through. What happens in the rooms beyond that door remains to be determined. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the history of paranormal investigation. If you're already drifting off to sleep, then our mission is complete. But if you're still awake, perhaps another deep dive through our previous episodes will carry you gently into slumber. Until we meet again in these quiet hours, may your curiosity remain boundless. May your dreams be filled with gentle mysteries, and may you always approach the unknown with both wonder and wisdom, seeking truth wherever it leads, even when it leads to places we don't yet understand. Tonight, we've journeyed through over a century of paranormal investigation, meeting the remarkable individuals who dedicated their lives to exploring the unexplained. What connects these diverse investigators across eras and approaches is their refusal to accept easy answers. Whether they ultimately concluded ghosts were real, misunderstood natural phenomena, or elaborate misperceptions, they all shared commitment to investigation over assumption, to evidence over mere belief.